The world woke up to a story no one expected. A story that would send shockwaves through the gospel and music communities alike. David Phelps, the celebrated tenor known for his angelic voice and unwavering faith, was facing something far more personal and heartbreaking than any note he had ever sung. His wife had officially filed for divorce. For years, they were the gold standard, the perfect couple. The kind of love story people admired from afar. A bond that seemed unshakable. Fans saw not just a marriage but a partnership filled with admiration, support, and deep affection. Together, they had weathered storms, celebrated victories, and shared their faith with millions. But now, that seemingly flawless foundation had collapsed. The media wasted no time. Within hours, headlines flooded entertainment sites. Social media exploded with disbelief, speculation, and grief. For fans, it felt personal. How could a love so steady, so deeply rooted in faith and mutual respect, suddenly unravel? Was it a mistake? A rumor? Or had cracks been forming long before anyone noticed? As more reports surfaced, so did conflicting stories. Some insiders hinted at personal differences, subtle, growing over time. Others pointed fingers at David's demanding career, saying it had slowly driven a wedge between the two. Still, no official word came from David or his wife. Not a post. Not a press release. Nothing but silence. And that silence spoke volumes. Friends close to the couple refused to comment, their reactions brief and heartbroken. "It's devastating," one said quietly. "We never saw it coming." With no answers, fans began to dig. Online forums lit up with deep dives into past interviews, old social media posts, and every public appearance the couple had made together. People weren't just curious, they were searching for clues, trying to make sense of the collapse of what had appeared to be the perfect love story. And yet, one question echoed above them all. Was this truly the end of David Phelps' love story, or was there more to it than anyone could see? From the very beginning, David and his wife seemed destined. Their love story unfolded like a modern-day fairy tale, authentic, faith-filled, and rooted in deep emotional connection. Whether on stage, in interviews, or in candid moments on social media, their chemistry was unmistakable. They weren't just in love, they were best friends. Soulmates. The kind of couple who could speak volumes without saying a word. They shared a life many admired, full of warmth, purpose, and shared values. David's wife wasn't just his partner, she was his anchor. The steady force behind the scenes who kept their home a sanctuary while he poured his soul into music. She cheered the loudest at his performances, prayed with him through every challenge, and stood by him through the chaotic highs and lows of fame. Together, they radiated authenticity. On Instagram, they posted candid photos. Cooking together, laughing with their kids, celebrating holidays in cozy, heartfelt ways. Each caption carried love, gratitude, and genuine joy. Fans weren't just watching a marriage, they were inspired by it. Friends described their relationship as rare, even sacred. They finish each other's sentences, one longtime friend once said. It's like they were made for each other. But something changed. Quietly. Slowly. And almost no one saw it coming. At first, the signs were invisible to the outside world. Their smiles at events still seemed bright. Their social media posts still included kind words and sweet photos. But behind the scenes, the bond that once seemed so effortless had begun to fray. It started with the little things. David, who had always made time for his family no matter how hectic his schedule, started becoming more distant. His calendar filled up, rehearsals, concerts, interviews, studio sessions. At first, his wife understood. She had always been supportive, the backbone behind his career. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, that understanding gave way to something heavier: loneliness. The late-night sessions became routine. The meaningful conversations turned into brief check-ins. Dinner turned into quick meals, often eaten in silence. The emotional closeness they once shared began to feel more like polite companionship. Still, they smiled for the cameras. Still, they posted the occasional photo together. But something had shifted. Deep beneath the surface. Whispers began circulating, though no one dared say them too loudly. Some suggested that David's passion for music had become all-consuming, that his role as a husband was quietly falling to the background. Others speculated about personal struggles hidden from public view. Issues never addressed, never discussed. Only felt. Neither David nor his wife said a word publicly. But those who paid close attention could sense it. The couple that once radiated unity had started to drift. And those who loved them the most could no longer deny the truth. This wasn't just a rough patch. This was something deeper. Something fragile. No marriage ends in a single moment. The unraveling is usually slow, painful, and layered. But there is always a breaking point. A moment when silence becomes too loud and the distance becomes too wide. For David and his wife, that moment came on an otherwise ordinary evening. David had just returned home after a long day of rehearsals and meetings. His wife had been waiting, hoping, as she often did, for just a sliver of uninterrupted time together. A conversation. A reconnection. She gently asked, "Can we talk?" Without lifting his eyes from his phone, David muttered, "Can we do this later?" That one sentence, simple, unintentional, was the final blow. Her voice shook as she responded, "David, when is later? Because it feels like it never comes." He finally looked up, frustration in his eyes. "I'm doing my best. Everything I do is for us, for our future." Tears welled in her eyes. "But what about now? What about me? When did I stop being a part of your present?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Years of patience, compromise, and silent sacrifice had come to this. For too long, she had held on, hoping things would return to the way they once were. But now, all that hope had been replaced with quiet heartbreak. That night, something shattered. The days that followed were filled with difficult conversations, decisions, and reflection. The couple who once stood as a symbol of enduring love were now walking separate paths. To the outside world, it was breaking news. But for David and his wife, it was the end of a long, painful chapter that had unfolded far from the spotlight. Though fans may never know every detail, one thing remains true: this wasn't a sudden fall from grace. It was the slow, silent unraveling of two people who once loved each other deeply but had simply grown apart. David Phelps will forever be known for his music, his faith, and his voice that touches the soul. But behind the stage lights and adoring crowds is a man who faced one of the hardest truths of life. Even the deepest love can falter. Was it fame that drove them apart? Time? Distance? Or was it just the natural erosion that sometimes happens when two people evolve in different directions? Whatever the reason, one thing is certain: love, no matter how perfect it seems, takes work. And sometimes, even love isn't enough to hold two hearts together forever. It was a love story that had weathered storms, celebrated victories, and stood the test of time, or so it seemed. To the world, David Phelps and his wife appeared unshakable, a picture-perfect couple grounded in faith, music, and unwavering support. But behind the spotlight, behind the standing ovations, a quiet heartbreak was unfolding. One that neither fame nor faith could prevent. This is the story of how understanding turned into sacrifice, and how that sacrifice slowly tore a once beautiful union apart. It started subtly, little moments that didn't feel like much at the time. A missed dinner, a tired excuse, a kiss that no longer lingered. She had been understanding, always. She knew what life with David would be like. The tours, the fans, the relentless pursuit of excellence. She had signed up for that. But what she hadn't signed up for was disappearing. David ran a hand through his hair one night, frustration clouding his face. "You knew what my life was like when we got married," he said. "You supported me. You stood by me. What changed?" Her voice trembled as her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold back. "I changed, David. I grew up. I realized that love isn't just about standing beside someone. It's about walking together. And somewhere along the way, we stopped doing that." The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Because deep down, he knew she was right. David had been chasing success, trying to build a legacy to secure their future. But in doing so, he had forgotten to be present. He had assumed her patience was endless, that her love was unshakable, that no matter how many nights he came home late, she would still be there. But tonight, he saw her, not the partner he'd taken for granted, but the woman who had quietly carried the weight of their marriage on her shoulders, alone. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she spoke the words neither of them dared say before. "I don't think I can do this anymore." And just like that, everything changed. After that night, something shifted. Conversations became shorter. Interactions colder. The warmth that once filled their home had been replaced by long, painful silences that spoke volumes. David buried himself in work, hoping the tension would fade if he just stayed busy. But he couldn't ignore the truth. Something had broken, and no matter how hard he worked, he couldn't fix it. Meanwhile, she stopped pretending. For years she had fought to keep their marriage alive, defending his absences, believing things would get better. But the truth was clearer than ever now. She felt invisible. Each morning she woke up to an empty bed. Each night, she ate dinner alone, reading short texts about how he'd be late again. And even when he was home, he felt miles away. Every conversation ended in frustration. "You're overthinking," he'd say. "I'll try harder," he'd promise. But nothing changed. Eventually, she stopped asking. And worst of all, he wasn't a bad man. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't unfaithful. But love isn't just about not doing the wrong thing. It's about choosing every day to do the right thing. And somewhere along the way, he stopped choosing her. Friends began to notice the change. Her smile dimmed. She stopped talking about David. When asked how things were going, she'd force a smile and say, "Just busy these days." But inside, she was crumbling. Had she made a mistake? Was she the only one still holding on? Every night, she stared at the ceiling, heart aching with a question she already knew the answer to. For months, she wrestled with the decision, torn between her heart and her reality. A part of her still believed in the love they once shared. But another part, the part that had felt abandoned for far too long, knew that love like this wasn't love anymore. It was survival. One evening, alone in a house that no longer felt like home, she finally made her decision. She wasn't sad anymore. She was exhausted. And so, the next morning, she made the call. Her hands trembled as she spoke to the attorney, her voice steady even as her heart raced. Saying the words out loud made it real. There was no going back. When David received the news, he didn't believe it. He thought it was a mistake. Maybe she was trying to scare him into paying attention. But when he saw the official papers, it hit him like a gut punch. This was real. This was his wife, the woman who had stood by him for years. And now, she was walking away. For the first time, David was forced to look at the man he had become. The husband he hadn't been. And the love he had taken for granted. But it was too late. Within hours, the media caught wind of the divorce, and the internet exploded. Headlines screamed speculation. Fans were divided. Some blamed David for prioritizing his career. Others wondered if deeper secrets lay beneath the surface. But David and his wife said nothing. There were no statements. No interviews. Just quiet acceptance. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't need to be explained. The hardest part wasn't the headlines or the gossip. It was knowing that once, they were everything to each other. And now, they were strangers. She moved forward with quiet strength, finally choosing herself after years of choosing him. David, left in the stillness of their shared memories, finally understood what she had been trying to say all along. Love isn't just about promises. It's about presence. In the end, this wasn't a story about blame. It was a story about two people who lost their way. About the silence that grows when love is taken for granted. It's a reminder that even the strongest marriages can break, not from betrayal, but from neglect. And sometimes, choosing to walk away is the bravest love of all. The truth, however, remained known only to the two people involved. Despite the media frenzy, David and his wife chose silence. No interviews, no public statements, no social media outbursts. Their silence spoke louder than any headline ever could. But that didn't stop the world from crafting its own narrative. David's supporters defended him fiercely, arguing that his dedication to his career should not be blamed for the breakdown of his marriage. He worked hard for his dreams, they said. Why should he be punished for that? One fan even tweeted, rallying for his side. On the other hand, others sided with his wife, insisting that no amount of success should come at the cost of neglecting the people who love you. The divide among fans grew, as old videos, interviews, and social media posts were picked apart for hidden clues. Were there signs all along? Had their love been falling apart for years without anyone noticing? Every detail was analyzed, every past moment turned into a clue for what had gone wrong. But for David and his wife, the real challenge wasn't the public reaction. It was the quiet, personal pain of letting go. David found himself struggling to adjust to a new reality. His once lively home felt hollow. The absence of her voice, her presence, her warmth, left a void that no amount of work or music could fill. He scrolled through old photos, reread messages, searching for a single moment that might explain how they had gone from everything to nothing. His wife, too, faced her own battles. Even though she had made the decision to leave, walking away from years of love, memories, and shared dreams wasn't easy. It was painful. But she knew it was the right choice, not because she had stopped loving him, but because she had chosen to love herself more. As the dust settled, one thing became clear. Life would go on. The headlines would fade. The gossip would quiet down. And the world would move on to the next big story. But for David and his wife, the scars of their love story would remain etched in their hearts forever, as a reminder. As weeks passed, the world moved on from the shocking news of David Phelps' divorce. The once dominant headlines were soon replaced by fresher scandals, new celebrity stories, and the endless cycle of public interest shifting elsewhere. But for David and his wife, moving on wasn't as simple. David struggled to adjust. His career was as demanding as ever, but for the first time in years, success didn't feel as fulfilling. The home they had built together now felt too big, too quiet. He would find himself reaching for his phone, instinctively wanting to share something with her, only to remember that she wasn't there anymore. The loneliness was suffocating, but he had no choice but to face it. Music had always been his escape, but now, it felt different. Every song, every lyric, reminded him of what he had lost. Some nights, he'd sit at his piano, fingers resting on the keys, but no melody would come. He had always believed that music could heal anything. Could it heal this? Meanwhile, his wife was learning to rebuild her life in a different way. Though leaving had been her decision, the weight of starting over wasn't easy. For years, her identity had been intertwined with David, his career, his dreams, their shared life. Now, she had to figure out who she was outside of that. She poured herself into rediscovering what made her happy. She traveled, reconnected with old friends, and picked up hobbies she had long abandoned. Each day, she reminded herself that healing wasn't a straight path. Some days she felt free. Other days, grief over the love she had let go of crept in. Though they no longer spoke, there was no bitterness between them, only an unspoken understanding that sometimes, love alone isn't enough to make a marriage work. The world would continue to speculate, fans would continue to debate, and the past would always be part of their story. But both David and his wife knew that the only way forward was to embrace the future, even if that meant doing so separately. And so they did. David returned to his music, channeling his emotions into songs that would soon tell his side of the story. His wife found strength in independence, realizing that the end of one chapter was simply the beginning of another. Their love story hadn't ended the way they had once imagined, but perhaps it had ended exactly as it was meant to, full of lessons learned from love and loss. With time, the pain of their separation softened. The wounds didn't disappear, but they became easier to live with. Both David and his wife had learned that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about accepting, growing, and moving forward with the lessons life had given them. For David, the biggest lesson was one he wished he had learned sooner. Love isn't just about grand gestures or promises of forever. It's about presence.